You got him. You're back. This is our Disruptor segment. Eric Brakey with us. Eric, Republican running for Congress, Maine's 2nd District. There was a time before 2018 that was the only Republican-held congressional seat in New England. 2018, Jared Golden kind of squeaked to a victory over U.S. 2nd District Representative Bruce Poliquin. Now that seat in Democrats' hands. Of course, Trump carried Maine, the 2nd District of Maine in 2016. State Senator Brakey in the race. He's likely to face Adrian Bennett, who actually met a couple months ago. Nice young lady. She's the presser for former Governor Paul LePage, who's also talking about running for governor again. So there's all kinds of interesting things happening in Maine. And joining us now, Eric Brakey. Good to have you, Eric, on the John Fredericks Radio Network.
Good morning, John. Glad to be on with you.
Eric, you raised $600,000. That's a pretty good showing to get in a race for Congress. This is a seat under normal circumstances the Republicans should win back. Tell me about your race and why are you the best candidate?
Well, this is going to be one of the top battleground congressional races in America in 2020. As you mentioned, this was the only Republican seat in all of New England for 4 years, and Trump carried it by 10 points. The reason I'm the best candidate to win this back is we've got the fundraising, we've got the grassroots, and we got the message. I want to get Washington, D.C. to leave us alone. That's what it's about. It's about a free Maine and a free America. It's about restoring our Constitution. And the people of Maine know that I'm a champion for their freedoms and their paychecks. During my tenure in the state Senate, I was responsible for the passage of constitutional carry to restore our gun rights, for welfare reform, to ban the purchase of alcohol, cigarettes, and lottery tickets with our welfare dollars, and to pass right to try to restore health care freedom for sick patients who are trying to just want to try something that could save their lives, even if the federal FDA says they got to wait 10 years for a rubber stamp of approval. Thankfully, President Trump has signed that into law federally since then, and so we have more health care freedom for everyone across America these days. But these were the things that I was responsible for in the Maine Senate. I was ranked the most conservative voting member of the Maine Senate every year I held office, and also one of the most independent because I didn't follow party leadership. I didn't follow the special interests. I followed the Constitution. That's what I took an oath to uphold, and that's what I believe in.
I tell you what, you've got experience. Obviously, you know how to run races. You know, that's one of the concerns I have from your potential opponent. She was a press secretary for former Governor LePage. I think LePage is a very interesting guy, and I just hope he runs for governor again because he always has an interesting soundbite for the media. So he's kind of a fun guy. But this is a very difficult race to win with no experience running campaigns, which potentially that Adrian wouldn't have any. Let's just get to some of the facts of reality here. Eric, if you were in Congress now, there was a vote yesterday on Syria, the president's policy there. He only got 60 Republicans voting for him. Kind of a shocking day here in the swamp. 400 and whatever it is, 80 voting the other way. If you were in Congress, how would you have voted yesterday on the president's plan to withdraw from Syria?
I would have voted against that resolution, and I would have supported the president on getting out of Syria. I think this is the great irony. Our Constitution says that Congress is supposed to vote on us getting into these conflicts. Congress never authorized our troops being put in Syria. They were only supposed to be there for 30 days. They've been there for years now. It's kind of this upside-down world where Congress doesn't want to vote to get us into the wars. They just want to vote against us getting out of the wars. It's crazy. I believe in an America First foreign policy. I believe that we've been in the Middle East for 2 decades now, and it is not better off over there than when we went. It's time for our troops to come home. We've put them through enough already. And when I talk to our soldiers, when I talk to our veterans, they don't want more wars in the Middle East. They've been fighting them for far too long, and if we support our soldiers, we need to listen to them.
Well, that is an interesting that's an interesting Pandora's box that you mentioned, that Congress won't vote to get us in, but they will vote not to get us out. I mean, it's kind of incredible, like you say. Now, if you're in Congress, are you going to push for a new AUMF? because the reason we're getting into these wars is because Congress is abdicating its responsibility of declaring them, and we're going on an AUMF that we did after 9/11. Would you be an advocate of getting a new AUMF?
Yeah, certainly. The AUMF that we have certainly never was intended to authorize us being in a war against Turkey to defend the Kurds, or in Syria at all, or Libya, or, this AUMF that we had after 9/11 has been stretched beyond all reasonable interpretation to justify wars that nobody ever imagined 20 years ago. And we're at war in how many countries now in the Middle East? We're at 18 years in Afghanistan now. I mean, President Trump has made overtures to getting out of there, and he's absolutely right about that. Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. The Soviet Union's empire collapsed there. Even Alexander the Great's empire collapsed there. The idea that we're going to funnel, there's going to be enough trillions and trillions of dollars and soldiers that we can funnel in Afghanistan to remake it in the image of Vermont, it's just not going to happen, and it's time to come home.
The image of Vermont. Okay, that's a great line, Eric. I'm just trying to picture that in my mind. The image of Vermont. That's good. We're with Eric Brakey. He's running for Congress in Maine's 2nd district. This is a Trump district. Trump won it in 2016 by 16 points, and the Republican there, the incumbent, got beat in 2018 during the wave of the midterms, and he's trying to win it back. I can never think of Afghanistan again without thinking of Vermont at the same time. Eric, great line. Okay, Eric, let's get to some other issues here in winning this race back. Let's get to impeachment. When you were on a couple of minutes ago, I was kind of going over the early testimony by EU Ambassador Sondland, not particularly helping the president, but he did say over and over that the president said there was no quid pro quo. Look, I had Steve Bannon on a couple minutes ago, and Bannon said that Trump is going to get impeached. The House has the votes. He's going to be impeached, and the trial is going to go to the Senate. But his thing is, if he got any Republicans voting for impeachment in the House, it was going to make it dicey. What say Eric Brakey on this situation? Because if you're in the House, you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. I don't agree with this witch hunt that's been going on since the first 30 seconds after the shock wore off that President Trump had won the White House. We went through this for 2 years with this Mueller investigation. Tons of taxpayer money wasted on this. And in the end, they came up with absolutely nothing. But they accomplished what they wanted to do. They drew it out long enough. They had the whole kind of specter of this hanging over a midterm election. They're accusing people of trying to meddle in our elections. Well, the deep state has been meddling in our elections. I mean, that was a big component in this in the midterms when the Democrats took back the House and won the elections here in Maine. Was the specter of this investigation that came up with nothing at all. So I see this as a continuation of the same witch hunt that's been going on. I don't support it. I think that impeachment is a very serious topic to talk about. It's not something that should be entered into lightly. And certainly we do want to be concerned about precedent. What precedent are we setting for future presidents that we say you don't cross this line? The concern I have is if the president is impeached over this, the line that is going to be set is, don't engage with, it's not going to be don't engage with foreign countries on these sorts of things. Presidents do that all the time. The line that's going to be set is don't ever challenge the CIA. Don't ever challenge the FBI, because that's where this is coming from. It is coming from these insiders in our own government, in these agencies that are supposed to be non-political, but seem to be completely unaccountable to the people and seem to have more influence over the direction of our government than even our own elected officials do.
All right, you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. This is our Disruptor segment. We are, just to give you an update here, we're with Eric Brakey. He's a Republican candidate for Congress in Maine's 2nd district. This is a district that Trump won by 16 points in 2016. And likely the Republican nominee, if they run a good campaign, is likely going to win that seat back with Trump on the ballot. And he is so far the only announced Republican in. There might be another one who gets in. But Eric is the pro-Trump America First candidate in this race. Eric, tell us about, you mentioned about you wanted to get Washington out of Maine, and we've talked about a couple issues right off the bat, but there's a couple others that I want to get your opinion on. One of them is the president trying to get some legislation passed. USMCA is one of them. If you were in Congress now, is that something that you favor?
The USMCA. I'm sorry,
yes.
Refresh my memory. Is that the trade deal?
Yes.
Yeah. I appreciate the president renegotiating these trade deals. I have some concerns about some of the specific clauses in this trade deal. I'm ultimately someone who's all in favor of bilateral trade agreements, so negotiating one-on-one with specific countries. But ultimately, I have concerns about these multilateral trade agreements where you have, 3 or more countries involved, because they usually set up these international bodies that infringe on our own sovereignty. And ultimately, then you create these international bodies that start telling us, America, how we're going to do things. So I do have some problems with this trade deal, though I think it's an overall good thing that President Trump is renegotiating these deals and opening the dialogue up again.
If you get to Congress and you're seated in 2021, Eric, by the way, Eric is a state senator from Maine, Republican. Eric Brakey, if you're there, one of the things that you're going to have to deal with is surprise medical billing, which has become a big issue for a lot of people, getting their surprise bills in the mail. There's a new plan floating around Congress to basically have rate setting. A lot of people like me are opposed to that. I think it should be, I don't think you should set the rate, and I certainly don't think it should get the patient in the middle of it. So a lot of people prefer something along the lines of the hospital and the insurance company working it out without a surprise bill going to the patient. Have you given any thought at all to that?
Yeah, I was the Senate chairman for Health and Human Services in Maine for 4 years, and so I've seen how screwed up our healthcare system is. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the more government gets involved, the more screwed up it becomes. We have this idea, and it's a false idea. It's sold to us, this idea that we need big government to get involved to fight the big corporations, the big insurance companies, the big hospitals. But the truth is, they're best friends with each other. It's a very corrupt. They're in bed with each other. And so the way that we have to fix healthcare in this country is not by price setting, not by getting government more involved, but by cutting out the middlemen, cutting out the bureaucrats, the government bureaucrats, the insurance bureaucrats, the hospital bureaucrats, and restoring the direct doctor-patient relationship. We can do that by, on the private side, expanding health savings accounts so that you can save tax-free for routine healthcare costs, and you can engage directly with your doctors, and you don't need the corporate or government middlemen to have their hands out collecting their toll, getting rich off of us. You don't need them in that situation. Maybe you have insurance to cover catastrophic things you can't plan for, but for our direct, everyday, routine healthcare costs, why are we paying exorbitant sums to these middlemen? It doesn't make any sense. And on the private side, on the public side, we put $500 billion into Medicaid every year. It goes into the hands from the taxpayers to the government bureaucrats, to the hospital bureaucrats. Let's cut the bureaucrats out. Let's put that money in the hands of the beneficiaries. Put that into HSAs for people that they control. Ultimately, the way we fix this, cut out the middlemen, put doctors and patients back in charge. The middlemen have screwed this whole system up.
Eric, let's get to gun legislation. Are you in favor of any restrictions, whether it's closing the background check loophole, extension of red flag laws, limiting sizes of magazines?
I am for none of the above. As I mentioned, I was responsible. I authored Maine's constitutional carry law in the state of Maine, so every law-abiding person in our state can exercise their Second Amendment rights without a need for a government permission slip. We were the 6th state to pass that. Now there's 14 across the country or so. There's the old saying, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. That's been true for our gun rights. On other issues, I organized the grassroots effort to defeat red flag in the state of Maine. We also, Maine people, we stood up and defeated the Michael Bloomberg referendum they put on the ballot for so-called universal background checks. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a de facto backdoor gun registry. They create a paper trail for every firearm purchase that's made. They can track down who owns the firearms. It's a way for it is a way that government could effectively, know who has the firearms. And of course, registration is the first step on the path to confiscation. So I'm for the Second Amendment. I believe that, the right to keep and bear arms is fundamental to a free society. That is the straw that broke the camel's back in the American Revolution when the British came to take our firearms. We should never, never let our Second Amendment be eroded. It is a keystone to maintaining our republic.
There's likely to be another primary race in Maine for U.S. Senate. I think there's a couple of candidates, or maybe two that have announced. In June, are you going to vote for Susan Collins, or are you undecided?
Well, actually, at this point, there was one primary challenger who did get into that race, but he's since withdrawn. And I don't know of any primary challengers getting in against Susan Collins. So it looks like it'll probably be, someone could still get in, but at this point, it looks like it'll probably be uncontested. And I will say about Susan Collins, I certainly have many, many disagreements with her on many issues. She's not the strong constitutionalist that I am, certainly, though I do appreciate that she voted for both of Trump's Supreme Court picks in Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. Gorsuch especially is probably my favorite person on the Supreme Court these days. And so I think that if it comes down to Susan Collins and the Democrat frontrunner, Sarah Gideon, who is the Speaker of the House, who's been responsible for pushing red flag laws and gun control and everything, all the far-left agenda in the state of Maine, I know that at least Susan Collins supports these picks to the Supreme Court, and I think that is going to be the long-standing legacy for restoring our country, is getting the Supreme Court back to an originalist interpretation of what the court's supposed to be and what our Constitution is supposed to mean. So in that regard, if that's
I'm out of time, man. Thank you. Fantastic. Got a text here from Ivan in Woodbridge, Virginia. Says, I love this Maine disruptor. I hope he wins. So you got some fans out there. Very quickly, what's your website?
Yeah, our website is ericbrakey.com, and if you can chip in $5, $10, $25, this is going to be the road to taking back the House and defeating Nancy Pelosi runs through Maine's 2nd District.
Eric Brakey, Disruptor Maine. ericbrakey.com. Eric, thanks for being with us.